Hey guys, welcome back to Clownfish TV. This is Neon. I am here with Geeky Sparkles.
Hello.
And we're going to talk about Indiegogo and making comic books and the comic book industry.
And unions and all that jazz.
And unions and all that jazz. Basically, from my point of view, it looks like there is more of an effort to control the flow of spice. We've got people working on the publishing side of things, pushing for unionization, not necessarily just for better working conditions, but also they want to be able to control what kind of content gets published.
And that's the problem, because they're not controlling and people are getting through with these huge campaigns and they don't like that. They think that it should be them because they're misinformed in thinking that if they stop them, somehow they'll get all the money. Or that doesn't work that way.
Yeah, if I shoot the romantic rival in the face, he or she is going to love me instead.
Right, and it doesn't work that way. Plus, this whole idea that if you don't vote a certain way or think a certain way or agree with them in a certain way, that you should all you have no voice whatsoever is a load of shit and not what this country is about.
Well, tell it to Portland. So anyway, that's one side of it. We're going to talk about that. And so what has happened is a lot of independent comic book creators have been going out to crowdfunding platforms to get their books made because, they might be blacklisted or whatever with comic book publishers, or they've got people that just don't like them for whatever reason.
And sometimes the book itself, there's nothing wrong with it that should get it flagged, that it shouldn't be allowed to be published on a crowdfunding platform just because people there don't like a certain person.
Right.
And if you're not violating any rules, then it shouldn't matter.
So people started going to Kickstarter because they're like, fine, publishers won't take me, whatever. And they formed a union at Kickstarter. Part of the union at Kickstarter.
It was a big part of the union at Kickstarter.
A big part of it wasn't necessarily for better working conditions, but they wanted the ability to be able to shoot down certain projects. And the union was founded around comic books, which really aren't that big of a moneymaker for Kickstarter or Indiegogo.
That's what I don't understand. I'm like, they have all these projects that get millions of dollars that are like tech projects or whatever on both platforms, but they're going to listen to the comic book people?
They're going to, yeah. So anyway, the people behind that union got gone when there was an economic downturn. Actually, there wasn't. They just said there was so they could get rid of them. Now, Image is talking about unionizing, and people are like, okay, fine, we'll avoid Kickstarter. We'll avoid Image. And we'll go out to Indiegogo. A lot of people have gone out to Indiegogo to do books because so far Indiegogo has not been gatekeeping as much as Kickstarter has. Well, that might change.
Right. And people were asking us our opinions on this. And we have our initial opinion, and then we have an opinion we're looking into a little bit more. So before we get into any further.
Before we get into it any further, please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, and rants. Guys, over 242,000 subs. Yay! Thank you so much.
Oh, if we hit 250 by Christmas, that'd be a Merry Christmas to me.
That would be. That's a lot of subs. 250 by Christmas. Can we do that?
That's only 8,000.
Hit that button, guys.
Yeah, make sure you're still subscribed, too.
Yeah, make sure you're still subscribed because YouTube is up to some shenanigans. So this actually is a couple weeks old, and it kind of flew under the radar, and I know that some other channels have been talking about it. I know Wes at Thinking Critical was talking about it, and I didn't really pay much attention at first. I'm like, well, they're probably just trying to make sure that to vet, especially tech projects.
Right. Initially, when you read through it, I skimmed through it. That's kind of what they were saying. It was like, we're going to do this with was it with Indiegogo and GoFundMe?
Yeah.
And I guess there are a lot of these big projects that don't get fulfilled, or there's been some people who got in trouble for scamming. So it looked like initially that it was an effort to work with these people directly so that we can avoid, these projects going, down the shitter and people getting screwed, and that's how it looked initially. But I think there's a little bit more to it than that.
Well, they're forming a coalition, and that makes me a little bit nervous. So it's Indiegogo and GoFundMe so far. They're going to try to vet projects a little bit better.
Which is okay as long as it's being vetted by, the sustainability of it, whether or not they think it can deliver, it's scams, that kind of thing. I don't disagree with that.
And especially when it comes to tech projects, like I know Kickstarter is, they've really clamped down on that because tech projects tend to bring in big bucks, and they also tend to be the highest profile.
They're very risky.
Yeah, because it's hard. It's hard to manufacture something and distribute it. I mean,
especially now?
Yeah, with that cooler thing, I remember that was a big deal. It was like millions of dollars, and Kickstarter kind of sidestepped it for years. They were like, well, you're backing a company, and if they flake out, that's on them. And there's nothing we can do about it. Indiegogo, though, they've been a lot looser in their guidelines. Now, Kickstarter, historically has always reviewed projects before they launch them.
As far as I remember, they always did. We had to wait for ours before for review.
Yeah, we had our first project was like 2010 or 2011, and we had to wait to be approved. They would look over. I mean, usually it only took a couple hours. And it depends on what it is. Comic books are relatively easy when you're dealing with, hey, can you realistically manufacture this piece of technology?
Well, that's happened where they got way more backers than they thought they'd get. And then because of it, it was going to take far longer to produce than they initially anticipated and what they had promised. I think that was initially what they were thinking when they were going to look into this stuff.
Yeah. So now Indiegogo is going to review them before launch. And that was one thing that kind of caught me off guard. We did our first Indiegogo campaign for a reprint of Shadowbinders. Mm-hmm. And it went pretty well, but I was surprised that Indiegogo's I'm like, okay, so how long do I have to wait until I can launch this campaign? They're like, oh, just push the button. I'm like, that's not how this works.
Now, on the back end, though, they did hold money and do some different things to try to ensure that people got what they were supposed to get.
Yeah.
It was all on the back end, though.
Yeah, after you launch the project, it does seem like there's more accountability on Indiegogo. I think you have to make monthly updates until the project is fulfilled. They do hold money in escrow for refunds. Mm-hmm. In fact, we just got, we did this, and these books were already printed, and we did another offer, and we actually sold more this time than we did the first time. But, they actually held the money for like 6 or 8 months until they gave us, the rest of it, which is kind of interesting.
And shameless plug right now, but if you want these books, they are available right now because we have them a whole bunch in the studio that are ready to go.
Yeah, we had to go back to
and I package them all.
She does. She does.
With love.
With love, but not too much love.
No.
Just enough. Just enough. Anyway.
I think good thoughts for you while I put them in the box. There you go.
It was weird because we did the campaign to basically get rid of the extra books that we had.
We have a bunch of extra books.
And we did not anticipate how many people would want these books. We're like, oh, we'll move a couple hundred sets and we'll call it a day. And we wound up through Indiegogo selling 1,200 sets of books. And then we sold another 200 or 300 through shopclownfish.com through Shopify. So we had to go back to press.
Right. So there's a bunch here if you want some. That make a long story short.
Yes.
Anyway, we've done this. We've been on these books, and this is going to be relevant later. From every step of the way, it's all done by us in house, and that's going to be coming up later in this video when we talk about image and all that. But back to this. So it is always good to have a backup upon a backup upon a backup. Mm-hmm. And I think what's going on is we have a lot of people whose business models are dependent almost exclusively on crowdfunding on third-party platforms. This is dangerous because we've seen things change. We've seen companies go out of business. We've seen policies change. People were betting on Patreon, and then Patreon would turn on them. Well, it's funny to me because comic books, when they're trying to promote these big numbers in comic book sales, they roll in the giant Kickstarters and Indiegogo campaigns into those numbers. Yeah. While simultaneously, there's concerted efforts to try to stop people from being able to print books.
Yeah, so where all of this is going, and we'll talk about this first, and then we'll talk about the unions, is it does seem like there is even more of an attempt to gatekeep the comic book industry on all sides.
So people yelling about gatekeepers so much. There's more gatekeeping now than I can remember in a while.
Yeah, so Indiegogo has announced some big changes for the crowdfunding platform. The biggest move is that it's transitioning from an open platform to a closed one, with the goal of eventually vetting every campaign before it goes live.
You could be sitting there waiting for months then to get your campaign to launch.
Yeah. Now, again, in the case of Kickstarter, it's usually pretty quick. Indiegogo is known more for tech than it is for comic books. Comic books were kind of a happy accident for them because there were people who were not able to get their campaigns through on Kickstarter. Right. And that kind of started it. And then other people just went to Indiegogo and bypassed Kickstarter.
A lot of times people went to Kickstarter, because Indiegogo was around the same time Kickstarter was, but people went to Kickstarter because Indiegogo wouldn't do the all or nothing at one point. It was basically you get what you get. So if you needed $5,000 for a project and you got $2,000, you still had to fulfill the project, but you got $2,000 of the $5,000 you needed. They later added that you could do an all or nothing, like Kickstarter had as well. So that if you didn't get your money, you didn't have to follow through and fulfill it. That was, that's a little bit of history there. But anyway.
Yeah. So, here's the thing. They said, what I've learned is that, this is coming from Will Haynes, who's Vice President of Product and Consumer Trust. I've learned that open is not what our community wants. Because
Well, who's the community? They never define these things.
The community. The community usually...
What, Twitter?
Probably. Open is not what our community wants. Crowdfunding is not shopping. People generally understand that now, but it also shouldn't be a leap in the dark, and it certainly can't be scamming.
Well, we're talking some of these projects are like hundreds, $1,000, to back it. It's,
Yeah, I mean,
not little.
There are projects that were, millions of dollars, again, mostly in tech, and they just like poof,
right,
disappeared. Or they would form a company to produce a product, and then the company would file for bankruptcy, and that was it. You know?
And then Indiegogo is the one who have to make excuses.
Yeah, it should be a leap in the dark. It can't be scamming. Our community of backers is the reason that anything happens on Indiegogo.
Which is true.
Yep, and they're counting on the platform to be safe, a safe, trusted space to engage with innovation.
I agree with that.
As such, Indiegogo will scrutinize projects more closely before those seeking funding can push their campaigns live under what the company is calling the Guidepost Program. Indiegogo will do more to ensure that projects have a viable plan to follow through and fulfill their rewards.
This sounds more to me like they're just making sure people actually fulfill what they're supposed to.
Yeah,
Initially.
Now, there is a coalition that they're forming with GoFundMe.
A Crowdfunding Trust Alliance.
Yeah, and that is what concerns me, because I think, and again, I don't think we personally are in any danger of being like blacklisted from crowdfunding, because there's nothing we do that's even remotely edgy, right? But I can see there being certain people that maybe Kickstarter doesn't like them very much, and they're like, okay, fine, I'm safe, I'll go to Indiegogo. Well, because somebody at the Crowdfunding Trust Alliance has decided this person is a badnik, they're not allowed to crowdfund on any platform for anything.
The group's goal here is to share best practices and discuss industry trends, and it aims to enlist other reputable crowdfunding platforms. So they're going around trying to gather up people like Kickstarter. Yeah,
so what they're going to do is you're not going to have an option, I think. It's basically like if you're blacklisted from crowdfunding for whatever reason, you can't just like jump to like, okay, Kickstarter doesn't like me, I'm going to jump to Indiegogo, or Indiegogo doesn't like me and there's some other platform out there, I'm going to jump to that. If you're blacklisted by the coalition, I imagine they will share that list with all of the other members. So you can't go to GoFundMe, you can't go to Indiegogo, you can't go to Kickstarter. And it sounds like on the surface, they always spin these things as being beneficial for the community. Like, we just want to keep people safe from being scammed. But as we've seen with Patreon, and we've seen with PayPal, and we've seen with other financial institutions, that if they get it in their head that a person is a bad person or they're associated with a bad group, then they're effectively blacklisted.
And then we keep having these people that are put in charge of these groups that are as far as much as people go on about the far extremist right, they are far extremist militant left, and both extremes are dangerous. I'm not going to say I don't side with either one, because I think they're both very dangerous for what they are. And I think that that's what they run into. They block anyone who doesn't agree with them on certain levels, and that's not what this should be about. It should be about, if you have a company that has questionable business practices, or you have a reason to believe they won't fulfill their crowdfunder, that's completely different than I don't like this person because they seem to like lean too far left or right.
Yeah, in the case of Kickstarter, so here's a little history on, real brief history of what happened and how Indiegogo blew up with crowdfunding. It was all because of a YouTuber, Diversity in Comics, now your boy Zach, who wanted to crowdfund Jawbreakers on Kickstarter, and he was denied. Not because of the project. The project was fine. He had a Marvel artist working on it. It was a PG-13 G.I. Joe type book. There was nothing wrong with the project, but there were people at Kickstarter that did not like his YouTube videos, his hot takes on the comic book industry. And because of that, he wasn't allowed to put his project on Kickstarter, so he took it to Indiegogo instead. A lot of other people were fed up with the situation. They're like, Kickstarter shouldn't be denying projects because they don't like the person creating the project for whatever reason. So they all went to Indiegogo too, and Indiegogo blew up. And actually, Indiegogo has a ton of 6-figure, 7-figure comic book crowdfunding campaigns. That's revenue that could have gone to Kickstarter, but because Kickstarter wanted to gatekeep.
It's revenue that the comic book industry gladly accepts when they want to roll it into numbers to say that that's proof that they're doing fine. They will turn their back on them in the media. I'm not saying whether I agree or disagree with these people, but they'll turn their back on them in the media. They'll deny them, write hit pieces to the cows come home until they want to add those numbers to their, comic sales to try to artificially inflate what they've been doing. Then they'll recognize them as, actual comic books.
Yeah, they'll take your money gladly. They'll complain about it. But yeah, there are millions of dollars that were, millions of dollars in comic book campaigns that raised on Indiegogo that the mainstream comic book industry won't talk about because they don't like the people raising the money. But yeah, they'll gladly add that to their bottom line.
Right.
Be like, oh, look at all the money, comics.
Exactly.
Comics doing great. Except for those comics. We don't like those comics, but we'll gladly.
But we'll count their numbers when it matters. And like I said, back to what we're talking about. The thing is, it seems on the surface that it's more about, I think it's more about tech, and it's more about, because there are a lot bigger crowdfunders than comics.
Comics
the whole way
small.
around.
Yeah.
They're little compared to the big ones. I honestly think they're more looking at the big things than they are the little things. So I don't think, honestly, it's going to be that much of an issue. Unless they start blacklisting people across the board. And that's a case, that's like discrimination, and that's not cool. But on the surface, I think it's more just about making sure people don't get scammed when they back them for $1,000 and they get nothing.
For now. Now, there is another option. And I think we're going to see more and more of this, is that you actually can set up your own store, and you can actually do crowdfunding through your own store. You don't even need to use Kickstarter or Indiegogo, because really all you're doing, especially with comics, and it's not so much the case with tech, but with comics, you're pushing your audience to their platform,
giving them your money, your audience.
Right. So
their emails for their mailing list, etc.
Yeah. So why not just send out an email blast to your previous customers and say, look, I'm crowdfunding a new book, but I'm going to do it myself on my own website using Shopify or something like that, which we talked about.
Until they get rolled into the coalition too, and then...
Yeah, it'll be like, oh, Shopify, yeah, if you want to use this app on Shopify, you're going to have to, submit to the test.
Now, I think the majority of creators are not going to be impacted by this coalition in any way, shape, or form. I don't think they're going to just go, oh, they're going to know who you voted and target everyone. I don't think that's the case. I think they're going to target anybody they consider high profile. For the most part, I think they're gonna look too closely at everybody's,
especially comics.
For comics, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people were looking at that because comics right now is a tempest in a teapot. The normies, people outside of the comic book industry, outside of Twitter, don't give a shit about comic book
when they think
industry.
crowdfunding, when they think Kickstarter, Indiegogo, they're not even thinking about comics for the most part. Usually it's like gaming.
Yeah, it's like tabletop
tech.
games, video games, high profile, millions and millions of dollars.
Well, I can see them using this against people in gaming, especially the way things are going with tabletop and gaming in general. I think they would get hit before comics people would get hit.
Yeah, I agree with that. So just something to keep in the back of your mind. I mean, again, it's like I don't think you should bet on any third party platform. That includes YouTube. That includes you need to have a life raft ready to go at all times, because the way things are going now, terms of service change in the blink of an eye, and you don't, somebody could get hired that absolutely hates your guts, and they bring their bias with them, and that's it. Now it's interesting going back to gatekeeping and Image Comics, and they're making the media rounds now. They're in Vice, and they're in the Hollywood Reporter,
because they're wanting their union.
They want this union,
which they kind of got told no.
They basically got shot down. And so now they're pleading their case to the media.
I want to take it from here. Can I take it from here? Because I keep seeing all these people posting these ridiculous stories and things on Twitter at different places. Well, because they're just trying to stick it to the creators. And again, I want to point out, the people that are trying to unionize with Image are not the actual creators. Okay, and wait till you hear these comments and stuff. But they keep these people are very misinformed. They're thinking Marvel and DC. Like, if you don't pay, this is to directly help the creators, the artists, the writers. No, that's not what this image unionization thing is for. It's for the office workers. Yeah. And when you read their demands, they want a more clear-cut, direction on what their job descriptions were. They didn't want them getting rid of people and then dumping more work on them. Things like that. Okay, I too I agree with that because, we've been in that position where they got rid of people and dumped more work on you for no more money.
Yep.
I think a lot of us have. I don't disagree with those positions. What I disagreed with was they want the right to reject any comic ever because of, nebulous reasons that they decide, and it's up to individual case-by-case basis. That's when you lost me, because it's like, why are the office staff deciding who gets to have a comic with Image? Now, in this article, we're going to talk about that for a second. I have to read these things to you because it's so funny. Here's what it says on Vice. Part of the problem has to do with the visibility of the work that it takes to make a comic book. The work these unionizing workers do. The people who are responsible for all the work it takes to get a comic book in your hands. The office staff, okay? Remember? Keep that in mind. Like the editors, the workers in marketing, and the people who cut checks. That they just said it right here. It's the editors, the marketers, and the people that cut checks that are trying to unionize.
And those people are important to any business, but you have to realize Image is a very different beast from other comic book publishers. Image is a bunch of little companies, separate companies, underneath one big umbrella.
Doing their own things internally.
Yeah, like I can almost guarantee you that Todd McFarlane has his own people more or less turning completed books to Image, and then they just kind of print them and ship them.
Again, the people who want to dictate what books get published under the Image banner with this union are the people who do some editing, work in marketing, and cut the checks. Okay? They do things that are largely invisible to readers, but vital to creators. Well, hey, at least Vice is admitting it's not the creators that everybody keeps trying to say it is. Okay? Yeah. It's not. Right from Vice, not. Burdening these workers with additional duties on top of what they're already doing is having an impact on the whole workplace. I mean, okay, I'll give them some of the things about wanting, more clear-cut, direction and not being dumped on with extra work. Okay, fine, I'll give you that. But back to the whole idea they think they should dictate who gets to print books. Here's a quote from the CBWU. We work directly with creators to make their books ready for print. We help to make sure creators are paid on time. And we assist in the marketing for the books. What marketing for the books? We work directly with distributors and retailers to put these books on the shelves. We work behind the scenes to give our creators the best possible success on their creator-owned stories. But we should get to decide who gets to have books put at their Image.
Yeah, that's the big issue here, wasn't it? Yeah, it was the fact that they snuck in the very last thing on their list of demands. They snuck in the right to basically veto any book and any creator.
Based on nebulous reasons that could be changed at any time.
They got to have a vote, just like Kickstarter. They wanted to have a say in who got to use the platform.
And again, the Kickstarter, they were just a payment processor. They weren't the ones creating anything. Same thing.
Yeah.
I think sometimes creators get a little bit too much credit. This is Dave Sheet. Yeah, Sheet. I always call him Dave. I want to say Dave Shit, but we'll say Sheet. I don't know how to say his name. A comic book writer from Chicago who told Motherboard, because, yeah, we write the books that people draw it and all that, but behind the scenes, someone's editing it, someone's color correcting it, someone is designing it. A lot of those things are done in-house, and they're not as difficult as they're making it out. Somebody's organizing a print schedule. Somebody's sending it to the printer. We do all of that ourselves. And most companies do.
Fun story, and I'll add it now. We didn't use them for the last run because of shipping delays. But Print Ninja, the original version of Shadowbinders, was actually the very first comic book that Print Ninja ever printed. They were not printing comics. They were not looking at printing comics.
No, actually, Neon had to talk with the person, his handler directly, and he had to work with them in China to work out how it would work to print comics. We are the Adam and Eve of Print Ninja comic printing.
Yeah, and I basically went to them because I was looking for a better solution to print books.
And you used to work at a print shop.
Yeah, I did. So disclaimer, I do have those pre-press skills, so I can put books together. And yes, it is time consuming, and yes, people don't realize how much work
usually people just hire someone to do it.
Yeah, usually you hire somebody to do it.
Not to the level they're making it out in the union thing.
People are crowdfunding comics every day, and they're hiring people or doing it themselves and putting professional quality books out. But anyway, yeah, so we went to Print Engine. It was basically like you print catalogs and you print other stuff. You can print comic books. And then we had a whole like 2-hour discussion with them about like the untapped market that was crowdfunding.
Mm-hmm. And then after they did our books, they came out beautifully.
They were, yeah.
They wanted books to give that they could take to shows. They took it to Chicago. Was it C2E2?
Yeah.
Because they were from Chicago area, I think.
Yeah,
and they took our books out to get more sales and get people interested in using Print Engine to print comics. And I remember we went to one convention once, and there was somebody who had a web comic that they really, really thought very highly of themselves. And they were going to learn us. And I remember they were talking to us, and they go, "Have you considered Print Ninja?" And it was all we could do to keep a straight face, because we're like, "Oh, are you kidding me right now?"
Yeah, and somehow along the way they forgot about us because they had multiple people leave. And
anyway, that's not here today.
Anyway, these books were printed in the USA. Mm-hmm. And this was actually kind of the reprints. And it was kind of a happy accident because of the shipping crisis. We're like, we can't ship books from China. Actually, at the time, literally, we could not get books from China. And then now we've got containers full of stuff. So it's like we got to have a USA solution because worst case scenario, I can drive down and these books.
It was driving distance for us.
Yeah, and it was like, and they're beautiful books. You know, they're absolutely beautiful books. But even the U.S. Printers, the North American printers, are getting hammered hard now because a lot of comic book publishers in the same situation. So it doesn't even matter if you get the books put together. You got to find a printer that has time available.
Right, but a lot of people, these companies already have a printer they work with and everything else. So back to the point, but they're like, we're the ones who, make sure that we, get them to Diamond or whatever they're going to do. They're the creator of their own stories. And they're talking about how creators get too much credit, that the office staff, there's a million things I never could do. Well, then you learn to do it because it's not that hard.
I'll tell you what this is, because I got to wonder, because a guy like Todd McFarlane, he runs his own toy company. That is way harder to run a toy company and get your toys in freaking Walmart, than it is to print comic books and send them out to, 1,500 comic book shops. I have to wonder if behind the scenes at Image right now, there are some people at Image that are like, you know what? Why are we even using you? Like we can print and ship books ourselves. We can print and ship books directly to consumer. We don't need you anymore. There aren't enough comic shops to warrant Image existing anymore. And we can send books to Amazon and sell them ourselves.
Yeah, and there's a lot of other places besides Image that do the exact same thing with this umbrella type thing.
Yeah. I mean, Image was great at the time because these guys were already huge deals at Marvel, and they pulled away. And they again, it's so funny they're talking about unionization because Image was the most capitalist comic book company out there. They were like, we're not getting paid enough at Marvel. We're seeing how much money these Marvel comics are making, and we want more. So we're going to basically knock off our own characters, and most of the early Image characters were just, a knockoff of Marvel and DC characters. And they're like, we're just going to do kind of, sort of, the characters we were doing at Marvel. We're just going to do them for ourselves, and we're going to keep all the money.
I'm trying to look here to see if this Dave guy has something on Image. And here's what it has. He's a writer from Chicago. He's a co-creator of these different books for Random House. He does some
Oni
particular
Press.
Oni, Boom, Cartoon Network. I don't see Image on here.
I don't know.
I mean, he could be an Image. I don't even know who the heck he is, but
But yeah, so look, I think they're trying to justify their existence at this point because if it were me,
he just writes it. He's a writer. We write it. People draw it and all that. Writing. No offense. I'm a writer. It's the easiest part. So people are like, you can fight me all day long. It takes Neon way longer to do it. I could write 5 books at a time. It takes him to do the art for 1.
I don't know if it's necessarily the easiest part, but it's
the least time consuming.
Yeah, because and we talk about this, and I mean it is what it is. But it's like you can sit down, and you can write not you in particular, but if somebody's doing a superhero comic,
people do. They write 3 books at once.
Yeah, and that's why, and they get paid more than the artists, and that's why I think the writers have kind of overtaken artists now because you see their names on so many more books because they can.
Yeah.
But you could be like, oh, hey, I need this huge, massive space battle with every kind of ship ever introduced in the Marvel Universe ever on this 2-page spread. And literally, that's all you have to put down and be like, it's your job to draw it. And then the artist, 5 days later.
So when this guy's like, I think that creators get too much credit because, we write the books, people draw it and all that. I'm like,
yeah.
I think Dave gets too much credit, personally, but whatever.
Well, then the Hollywood Reporter, they're talking about how they want this to spread to Marvel and DC. And I can tell you in the position right now, especially Disney, the position they're in right now, they're going to be like, fuck you. We'll just shut Marvel down and we'll
sent
outsource
Star
it.
Wars, the Dark Horse. What else
Yeah.
can we send out?
Yeah, we'll just outsource everything. How you like that? Because Chapek's not going to, he's not going to do that. They're sick of the unions they have in the theme parks. They're like, they're not going to do it for comics because frankly, comics mean jack shit.
It's too much of a headache. They'll just shut it down.
They'll shut it down. They'll be like, we're outsourcing everything. Fuck you. You know, we're done. We're done here.
So yeah, keep pushing if you want to. I'm just saying, you know, if your reasoning for your union is because you want to be like have more clear duties, you want to not be piled on extra work without the compensation, things like that are legitimate concerns. Okay, fine, I get it. But when you start like basically at the heart of it, I just want to control and veto books based on nebulous reasons with no rubric other than it's case by case basis, whether we like you or not, then the answer is no. That's not a good enough reason for a union.
No.
Especially not for the office staff. I'm not belittling office staff. I've done those jobs. I'm just saying I would not think that, you know, cutting the checks gives me an opinion on what books we should print at a company over the people doing all the damn work.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, as a company owner, you know, and I'd like to think that, you know, we treat our employees as best we can. But if I had an hourly employee come to me and be like, you know, hey, boss man, we all decided we're going to tell you what kind of stuff you're going to make at your company. I'd be like, well, I'm going to have to tell you that you're going to have to clear out your desk by the end of the day because that's not how it works.
No, especially if you're the person that your job is to, you know, oh, my job's marketing. I made sure I ran an ad in a paper.
Well, you can go do that someplace else.
That's
then,
right.
I guess,
And if you don't like it, just go someplace else.
Because at the end of the day, it's my fucking company,
Right.
right? So get out of here. And I think a lot of these, like, I could totally see Todd McFarlane just taking his ball,
Yeah,
going
who
someplace
knows?
else. Anyway, I'm gonna wrap this up.
Yep.
Please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, and rants, guys. We'll talk later.
Bye.